Okay, as we always do, let's start our October 11th meeting, joint meeting with the Emergency Services Advisory Council and the Board of County Commissioners. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. This joint meeting, as we all know, is an open session. What you have here are the 5 Board of County Commissioners, along with our Chief Administrator and the head of our Fire EMS, Mr. Robinson. We have an agenda in front of us where it shares that I will be giving my remarks, which I'm doing right now. Then the Emergency Services Advisory Council, otherwise known as ESAC, will provide the strategic plan update. We'll have a conversation about the FY24 budget. Our Chapter 37, which we had conversation during open session this past Thursday, and appreciate all the community's input to date on that. I imagine, Mike, you will be leading the conversation on the impacts of hiring delays and facilitating it from there. And then we'll have an open discussion. We are scheduled for 2 hours having this joint meeting, which is a pleasure to have 2 hours allocated, but as I always think, you can allocate, but you don't have to execute. So if we can execute in less, that's okay. But, you know, this is about quality, not quantity. So with that said, let me just turn it right over to the ESAC strategic plan update. Sir.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. I'm glad we've had this opportunity to provide you an update on where we are with the activities that we've been working on and continue our discussions that we've had in the past. That the last time we got together was in June. I do want to provide an update on where we're at with our strategic plan. And it's really, I'm very pleased with where we're at with the strategic plan right now. We're having 2 or 3 of the groups come back at each of the ESAC meetings to give us an update on where they're at and also help, you know, provide recommendations and things that we're going to in the future. And particularly, like I want to talk about some of the things that they've included so far in the proposed budget as we go through this next go-round. In our administration part, where they talk about goal 1, like we currently do have an organizational chart, but I've asked the group to go back and discuss what future organizational charts look like. We have something that's very basic right now, but as we go down this hiring path and where we're going to be going, we need to look at it again and just to make sure that we have it organized correctly in the way that we want it. And Dan Plunker, who's also on the ESAC board, leads that conversation, and we relayed that information to him at our last ESAC meeting. So the MOU is underway. I sure hope it's almost done. I believe that we're getting close to having it completed, and I appreciate the leadership that the Visa Vice President and President have been leading in that conversation, and hopefully we'll have something worked out. I don't know if Bruce or Susan, if you want to talk about any of that with the MOU or not.
We are very close. We have a couple of companies that have come back with some concerns about verbiage, and they are going to be presented to Roberta and her group to make sure that everything's copacetic. And we're hoping to vote for it in November.
What's the gist of the verbiage? I mean, is it?
I have not seen it, so I don't know what the problem is. Have you seen it yet, Roberta?
There were, I responded to at least 4 companies in writing on different issues, and I believe I satisfied their concerns. We did meet with an attorney from one of the companies, Roberta, Tim, and myself, and there were a couple of language changes from that company. We're awaiting that attorney to return that document. It's now been 3 weeks. We're going to contact that company or the attorney and see what the status is.
Okay.
And then we're going to have to send that ad to all 14 companies for their review, but we believe we can do that without a meeting because all of the I've been in contact with all 14 companies in the last probably 2 weeks, and all but the one we're waiting on have basically told me that they have met at their company meetings and essentially they've agreed to it and they're ready to sign. So we're hoping the other company will come through and we can get that moving.
I mean, personally, I guess and professionally, I'd like to see this done no later than the first week of November.
Yes, absolutely.
This should be our target and get this moving so we can move forward. This should not be delayed for another board coming in to
No.
relearn.
Absolutely.
And unless there's concern about that, I mean, it's not about rushing it through, but
Oh, no, it's
the
been-
quality's got to get done.
Yep.
And if we put a mark on the wall, I mean, is there a concern from any of us in doing that?
I'd like to see it done before this board's done.
So,
I think that's the way it should happen.
Yep.
My goal is to have the vote at the CCV's meeting in November. That's my goal.
November
is
is a
the
big
7th.
month, just make it early.
It's the 7th. It's the
7th
first
of
Monday.
November.
Yes.
Okay.
It's the first Monday.
Okay, it's a Monday, so
Yes.
Yeah.
then by the 10th or whatever that
Yep.
Thursday is, let's,
And if they vote in the affirmative,
Okay.
it'll then be ready for the signature of the commissioners.
okay. Sounds
And
like a
each of the
plan.
company
Sounds like to
presidents.
put a target, you know? Take the hope out of it and let's move forward. Okay, cool.
Logistical standards that we talked about, Director Robinson's in the process of, and it's one of the things in the FY '24 plan is to hire a quartermaster and start, standardizing all of our gear, which is already standardized, but having a standardized purchasing plan instead of having 1 through 14 departments going through one. So there's a lot of positives that's happening right there with a lot of the logistics part of it. Technology requirements are being addressed both for the employees that are assigned to our fire station, as well as any other type of upgrades that are going to be needed for the fire stations. I know that the director has also been heavily involved in those conversations, and that's also mentioned in the MOU of what's to be provided to each of the 13 stations that are getting people, so that we can be prepared to accommodate, leave and earning statements and time and attendance and all those kind of things that need to be had. That infrastructure is not in the stations yet. There's fiber there, but there's not that infrastructure there yet. Goal number 5 was talking about employment. We've got a 3-year plan out right now for what the stations are getting deployed and when they're getting deployed and the number of people that they're supposed to get. But after we start this, I'd like to take it to the next step, because this is just going to be a beginning to get where we're at right now. And I can talk about that a little bit more when we get down to some more of the conversations. So right now, most of the goals in the administration section are either completed or they're underway. And I feel very comfortable with that. And in fact, I think it's pretty cool how it's working out so far. I'll say it right now, and I'll probably say it again, that a lot of this work that is being done with everything that I just mentioned is still with volunteer horsepower. There's a lot there is a lot of support coming from the folks that Director Robinson has hired, but most of the horsepower is still coming from the folks that are volunteering to do this. I believe this coming month, we're going to hear from the budget folks as well as from the communications folks. The budget piece would be very pertinent since we're getting ready to start that season soon. Communications, that's important to me right now, because not only to the folks in the fire and rescue departments that need to be addressed and kept abreast of what's going on, but I think it's also important that we start looking at the community and how we start relaying this message out to the community of what's going on. There's been a lot of good stuff that's been in the paper, but I think we can get down to a little bit more detail so that they can understand what the county is providing, and what the volunteers are still providing in this whole arena as we keep going down. The one thing that is a continuing concern of mine, as well as to the rest of the ESAC, is the emphasis on the need for accurate statistical data. We still don't have it, and I know that's one of the things in Director Robinson's budget that he's going to hit on, and we are going to strongly support that happens, that we need this data. The information's there, we just need to put it in usable form.
You can't put Eddie Ruck in a box?
Well, Eddie is in a box, but he's still got his pencil and his paper out here.
Just saying,
He's doing this, and
okay.
It's,
No, I agree, so,
it's, you know, we're flying blind.
yeah.
On the operations side of the strategic plan, SOPs are currently being worked on. Director Robinson has about 30 of them that ESAC is going to be reviewing. And we discussed this at our last meeting, that if we can get to the 90% level on a lot of these policies, so that we can get people on and in and start working, we can go back and readjust, we can adjust them as we go through. That's the cool thing, and I think it's the benefit of having the ESAC being an independent organization, not tied to any, you know, any particular person, but it will provide us the flexibility to sit down there and quickly go back and hopefully adjust things as we go through. The chain of command, I know Commissioner Rothstein, you had, your eyebrows kind of went up when we talked about Chapter 37 last week, but rest assured, Director Robinson is at the top of the food chain and is the person in charge.
No, it made perfect sense once I understood both administrative control and operational control. If it was if it was administrative, it's one thing, but if it's operational, you know, and therefore director/chief, to me, makes sense, as long as there's operational control that comes with it, so, okay.
The operations group continues to look at minimum staffing requirements. They're also looking at unit response times and trying to come up with different ways of making the most out of the resources that we have today. We know we have an issue, and that's why we're all sitting around this room today of, you know, responses, and we're trying to get the biggest bang for our buck for getting the people to respond from the different stations. You know, we're trying to look at ways of not trying to potentially pull 3 or 4 pieces of equipment out of one station to complete a box assignment. And knowing that we currently have shortfalls in staffing. So those are the things that we're trying to look at, just being kind of creative. And again, that goes hand in hand with the running assignments. Again, these are being worked with Visa's committees on fire and rescue operations as well as EMS operations. And Director Robinson's right in the middle of it with the folks that he's hired right now, trying to look at some of these things. So those were the highlights that I wanted to touch on with the strategic plan. It was kind of interesting. I was reading an article just yesterday on one of the trade magazines where former fire chief in Prince George's County was making reference to some people who he had worked with at the National Fire Academy, and one of those people was the facilitator of our strategic plan that we had. Dr. Burton Clark helped us on
He
that.
came from Frederick, right?
He lives in Mount Airy, but on the Frederick County
Okay,
side of,
yeah,
but
okay.
he's been all over the state, you know, working
Yeah.
with different jurisdictions and working with different jurisdictions.
Sounds great. Before we move on, are there any questions or from the board? The only thing I had is, with quartermaster, with vendors, are there multiple vendors that are
Yes.
used? Not all vendors are equal. You have a preferred list of vendors?
Yeah, we've been working with purchasing since we started everything, and we've made a number of appearances to you all. And in the case of the turnout gear, we actually have 3 authorized vendors. And a lot of this, we're taking advantage of the regional purchasing groups that are out there in the places as far as Houston, Galveston, and getting the best prices on the goods and services that we're using.
Or each house, and I don't know, I mean, does each house have the same vendor equipping that house, or is it
No.
personal preference to the firefighter?
Well, right now, it's personal preference. This year's budget, we took over the personal protective equipment, turnout gear, if you
Yeah.
will. So we have finally gotten the approval, I think 2 meetings ago, to move forward with that. That'll be maintaining 3 vendors, and we have a process. The challenge was one size didn't fit all. We had a lot of loyalty from the volunteers, and we're looking at the same outcomes with that. So rather than create too much contention all at one time from different areas, we thought that, you know, the things that were very specific to them, turnout gear, it follows a specification regardless. Anybody can produce it. But there were several vendors that people had loyalty to for years, and if they met our minimal procurement criteria, then they stayed on that vendor list. There will be some situations I'm working for, with the FY24 budget, when with our plan is to bring centralization, there's going to be some areas like fuel that we will be taking over next year. There's going to be a lot of discussion with that because the county has their current vendor, and the volunteer companies as local entities have been very loyal over the years to other vendors. So
Okay.
that's why I'm here.
No, yeah, I'm just,
It's,
it's learning for me on
Yeah.
how, equipment's procured, so,
yes,
We had a standards for personal protective equipment,
right.
but each of the stations were allowed to go get the equipment at at the vendor that they chose to get it from.
And each station allows the individual firefighter to select from?
No.
And to be fair, what we had was, we had a committee come together,
Yeah.
spec gear, and that was brought through a vendor, one specific vendor, and a price point was made based on using typically somebody else's spec. So we would use a larger company spec to get the best break we can, because obviously, we're not buying as many sets of gear as some of
Right.
our companies around us. So that was the approved spec and vendor, and then some departments opted out of that if they could get a better price point for the same gear. There are a couple vendors in the area providing the same manufacturer, so the manufacturer was the same.
Right.
The spec was the same, but there might be loyalties because you have, literally, there are members in some of our departments that work for vendors. So sometimes they can't use that vendor because of that relationship. So they would also look at other things that they had to do. But for the most part, if they were going to a different vendor, is because they were getting a better price than what we were getting, but they weren't able to provide it to the entire county, as all 14 departments. But there was very few, the last time when we did the process, there was very few outside vendors other than the approved
Right.
vendor. And the only other thing was that some of the vendors that were able to put in, they couldn't provide all of the gear. So pants and coats essentially are one, that's the biggest purchase, the biggest dollar amount. And then you have helmets, gloves, boots, and hoods that, in some cases, they were seeking different vendors for those items, but the
Right.
bigger ticket items were coming from one. So that was just the process. But it was done at a pretty large thing, and again, it was mainly for cost savings because of the relationships.
and with us taking that over, we reached out, Kevin Fox, who's our training, health, and safety person, that's underneath of his umbrella, and Kevin reached out with the volunteer committee, and he still meets with them on a regular basis. We've got, at least for now, we've got everybody is on the same sheet of music. We've gotten a consistent price, and there's still a choice of at least two or three vendors right now, depending what part of the gear you need. Our long-term goal, and we just met with Public Works today and with Taylor, is we're trying to secure some warehouse space out at the Public Safety Training Center, which you'll probably hear more from the sheriff on, because they're going to have to vacate a place. We met today about different fees, different options with that property. And in the interim, we're using a part of that barn building where
Right.
Public Works came in and retrofitted some secure storage for us.
Right.
So our goal is, when somebody has to turn over part of their gear, that we'll have certain levels of it in common sizes that are going to be stocked, and they can
Right.
turn that around a lot quicker.
Okay.
One other last goal that I wanted to touch on under operations was that there has been discussion at our last ESAC meeting, just preliminary discussion, about forming a committee to look at equipment needs in the future. Discuss the needs for a committee to review the purchase of a new apparatus, and especially if we're going to be starting a new service. Somebody wants to put a new rescue squad in and they haven't had that service in the past, we want to have that conversation. And the reason why we want to have that conversation, one, is to find out, okay, let's look at response areas and the need, but then it's also looking at the long-term tail of maintaining that piece of apparatus that the county currently pays for, through the budget-wise, for maintaining the equipment. So that's something we're still going to work on, and we're trying to figure out where would be the best place to place that committee, and when we move forward with that recommendation.
They would be able to pay attention to the evolution of technology in the industry too, new things
Absolutely.
coming up.
Yep, yep.
All right, good.
Yeah, I mean, and most of the departments are currently doing that now, or, you know, as well as throughout the rest of the fire department community. So we're talking about mainly, I'll use Mount Airy as an example. We just put that new ladder truck in service a couple years, you know, a year and a half ago. All right. Before we would put that, we did go to Visa and say, hey, we want to put this, and Visa gave their blessing on it. But then I'm looking at it furthermore from a county perspective, you know, putting my ESAC chair hat on, so how much is this going to cost the county in the future as far as maintaining it? And that's where we want to have that conversation. Chief, I don't know if you want to say anything more about that?
No, you're on it. We want to make sure as we see changes in not only response patterns from what gets dispatched, but what's the necessity of it? Do we need to have 6 or 7 heavy rescue squads, which now cost over $1 million, and the county weighs in on this because we're using county funding, at least for a low-interest loan. So we want to try to get a greater handle on that. Another area that comes to mind is we're getting ready to take over the replacement of ambulances, and we've recently had a number of companies have gone out and decided to purchase new ambulances, which we welcome because starting today, if we purchase a new ambulance, we're not going to keep up with it. So the fact that we have new ambulances in the system is a good thing, but we want to make sure we're not overextending our efforts and having too many of any one thing. So it's really an efficiency move, and ultimately there are costs that the county assumes on each piece of apparatus that's procured. So we want to kind of keep checks in that. So ESAC is probably the logical place to manage that. And so I had approached ESAC and said, we've got to come up with a better way. And this shouldn't just be me telling people what we're going to be doing. It should be done under the guise of ESAC, because that's the purpose of having an advisory council like ESAC. And it keeps everybody who's a player engaged in the process.
And the other part of that is it also could be ending a service. For example, we have a station that has a dive team, and that would be something that if they were going to stop providing that because they no longer had the members, or that's something that that group should also then look at to say, okay, is this something that can just end, or is it something that the county now has to pick up and provide? Another example would be, we don't currently have a county air unit. We don't have an air unit in the county now. We have lots of cylinders on our apparatus. We have to have a second one for every riding position, and we have to, so there's lots in the system, but we don't have one. When one of our departments, it moved around a couple times, about 3 stations, and then the last station was like, look, we can't maintain this anymore.
Right.
It would have been, at the time, if we would have had a county department, then they could have come in and said, well, we really need to keep this going, so we're gonna have to do that. So it's new services as well as replacing old services that may be outdated, that may just go away. So it's just one of those things that.
I thought you were asking for an airplane at first there, or a helicopter, an air unit.
It is to fill air cylinders.
It's not a bad idea.
Let's do a drone first, Roberta.
Yeah, we just need just a drone program. Well,
Does anybody have a drone?
blow our budget.
I think Ted just had a heart attack.
Yes.
Thanks for
He
Second one of the
finally
day.
started listening.
Air
Wait,
units
what?
is something we can go pull up,
Taylor's here
bring to a
for-
fire scene to fill up air bottles and things like that we're using. So all of the stations, I believe all the stations now have cascade systems.
Most of them have cascades, and they can fill them when they get back to their stations,
Right.
but it's to be able to continue. And with the number of people on the scene, the
Yeah.
number of cylinders,
Right.
the length of
Right.
the cylinders,
Right.
the cylinders now, some last 45 to 60 minutes supposedly, where the old cylinders that some of us started with were called 2216 cylinders because that was their pressure, and they were really only good for about 20 minutes, right? And they were made out of steel, and now they're made out of carbon fiber and.
Or if you were
So not to
huffing,
date
if you were
anybody.
huffing more, it'd probably be about 10 minutes, but, you know.
Right.
But, serious, the water, it's in Gamber, right? Is the,
Yes, the dive unit
The
is
dive unit's
in
in
Gamber, but
Okay.
that would be a tremendous expense
Right.
to add that service at the county level
Right.
if they opted to get out of it. And
First, we'd have to build a swimming pool, so that would be.
Concrete pond.
We have one. I got you.
yeah,
There you go.
okay.
So, is there any other questions about the strategic plan? I'd like to just bring up a couple items under the FY '24 budget.
No.
So under the FY '24 budget, as I mentioned in June, as we've been having our ESAC meetings and we've been having conversations, it looks like that we want to try to do something in future FYs, that I've personally been making a list of here's, I don't want to say our wish list, but our needs. I don't want to say our wants because it's a requirement. And if it's a requirement, the requirement doesn't go away just because we don't have the money to do it. So I want to try to be able to keep track of those things. And the one that again, I'll say this once, I'll probably say 10 more times before the day's over with, is I'm glad to see in Director Robinson so far proposed budget is a data analyst. Now, personally, my only concern with that is that he's putting in for a part-time data analyst. I think with the information that we're talking about getting and needing as this department grows, that I would love to see this be a full-time position. But again, we'll see how the part-time position works out in the near term, and we'll see how, if we need to grow that position in the future. But definitely has to happen.
And we really need it now,
Yeah.
not in July. We really could already be putting that person to work.
Yeah, there's so many things that I talked to Director Robinson about that when we talk about it, says, well, you know, man, I wish we could have data on how many times during the course of the day we've got 3 ambulances going to 1 call.
Yeah.
Just so that we can make up staffing, or get the proper staffing and the proper people there to the location. So, yes, Bruce, that's a great point. If we could have it now, that would be even better. Some of the other proposals in this capital and employee positions, you know, ESAC is on board with those. We are well aware that the items in the budget list are based on what the budget can bear. But again, the requirement doesn't go away just because we don't have the money to do it. And as we continue to hear from the strategic planning groups, we will make recommendations to the budget as needed. So, you know, every month we have some type of discussion about that during our meetings too. If there's anything that needs to be added to the list. Bruce, I don't know if you want to add anything else on the budget? Chief?
No, Rick hit it. We're looking for a data analyst, which would be a part-time position initially. And I think with our proximity to McDaniel College and the programs they have there, that would give us potentially a supply of somebody who might have completed their bachelor's degree, is now working on a master's degree, and it would give them pretty decent employment plus experience. And we're also going to reach out to them and look at internship positions,
Yep.
where we might be able to get someone for even a small stipend to come in and accomplish those. I mean, the data analytics capabilities that are out there today are phenomenal. We can't take advantage of them because we just don't have the time to sit down and do that right now, nor do we have the right software. And before we invest in anything, we want to have someone that, as part of their analytics, can look at what are some of the best products there. They don't necessarily have to have fire and EMS stamped on them. There's probably a lot of generic things that we could use, and obviously working with IT in that area as well.
Great idea.
But, you know, our goal is we have to have consistent data. And so I've stopped presenting a lot of data only because as I present data, somebody else in the room will discredit that data for me. So it's an absolute priority that we get somebody that's committed to that, which again, we're growing our infrastructure. And to me, it's appropriate as we move towards 250 employees to have an infrastructure of 6 to 10 people really is a reasonable thing if you look at organizational development and, you know, what you need to support something of the magnitude that we're going to be supporting. So data analyst is a primary area we're looking at. We're also looking at the quartermaster, which would be a civilian position, so certainly at a lower cost than a uniformed person. And that quartermaster would not only maintain our warehouse wherever that ends up, but they would be linked to the vendors, to the purchasing department. The other thing that we're looking at, back to the word air, is long-term, as we replace self-contained breathing apparatus in the county, we're looking to centralize that, where we do a single county-level purchase, but also get into the maintenance of that, which we now contract out. So the quartermaster would be the likely person to send off to the technical school for a week or so to get trained to do at least some of the repairs now to reduce the cost. If it's a complete rebuild, the person isn't going to have the time right now. But for a lot of the annual required maintenance tasks, that person could double in there. So pushing the quartermaster, we also want to look at adding, we have the 3 cars that are going out there as soon as we get the people hired. Our challenge is, and this comes from a number of meetings that we have each week with HR, and the complexity of VTI, the staffing and the management of overtime, callbacks, sick, everything else is going to be significant. And the shift commander will not only be the senior county departmental person on duty to handle a lot of troubleshooting, they're also going to have a district where they're running EMS calls. And we get it, that's going to be there initially, but as soon as financially feasible, we'd like to add that additional car, and that way that shift commander can be freed up to handle the shift commander tasks, and we can consistently cover all 3 battalions. So that would be 4 additional paramedic positions, if we can find the 4 additional paramedics. That's the challenge. And we're going to a meeting later this month with the health department. We've talked previously about having the community paramedic who would go out and do some routine things, and we're not sure who the best partner, whether it would be somebody from Celine's office, Carroll County wants to be involved, as in the hospital, the health department wants to be involved, but pairing a nurse and a paramedic and taking the people that are calling 911 multiple times that end up in most cases being social service related issues, and having someone who's available just to focus on that population. And they would operate 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, so it's only a single paramedic. We'd train some backups to fill that space when that person wasn't available or they took off. But we think that would have a huge impact on reducing unnecessary calls. And the reality is, under the billing process, which we just did our last interview this afternoon, under the billing process, we're not going to be able to recover billing for people if they are underneath a code for their service that has already been paid for once in a 30-day period by Medicare. So we're still running those calls. We're actually losing money. The hospital's losing a lot of money because that person comes back. They've got to do A through G on that person, and there's no cost recovery. So we're looking at potential partnerships that would be out there where Carroll Hospital, who's very interested, the health department's very interested, that part of the position would be at no cost to us. We would pay for 1 paramedic position. It would also be an opportunity for people who may no longer think they're effective, as, you know, they have PTSD or whatever, but gives them a purpose in our system without having to send them off for a line of duty pension. We could recycle these people, make them productive again, doing things that are helping the community, helping them. And looking at Frederick County's program, we see a lot of promise to what that could do for the citizens, and also what it could do for our call volume. And Mike Karolenko, who works in Westminster, can tell you the number of repeat patients that they get. And there seems to be a high frequency of those that are out there now. So we're also going to propose that. We'll let it go through the budget process and see where we end up.
I'm glad this is on your radar screen, because people at LifeBridge are emphasizing this to me.
Yes.
And seeing you on the front end wanting to address this. I know since the very beginning, you've talked about collecting the data and analyzing it and putting it into policy. I'm glad you're following through with it in light of all the other stuff you're handling.
Yeah, and a lot of the impetus for this, I'll give them credit where credit is due, is to the Chief of Westminster Police and to Sheriff DeWeese, who have their own initiatives similar in nature within the their law enforcement agencies, but they can't handle any patient care issues. So a lot of these people have issues, and the concern is, well, we have to have them medically cleared, and we can't do that as law enforcement, so we got to call 911, we've got to take them to the hospital, and it goes on. And Along with Commissioner Frazier, I'm on the opioid council, and we get a lot of good information at that group, and we're working closely with them because there is a very defined population within Carroll County, and, Westminster and Tawnytown, there's a lot in those urban areas, but there's a lot in the rural areas, which are the, 80-plus to 100-year-old people that are literally living alone. They don't have any support network, and we think this person can be very valuable to help them with their, daily medical needs that don't require the acuity of an emergency room. And it's really a benefit to everybody, so we're going to put that in as well. So those are our real budget highlights, other than things that are attritionally replaced. We're continuing with our hiring. The good thing about our timing of hiring at this point is we're going to have an eligibility list that's good for a year, so by the time we get the first 88 people on, fiscal year '24 will be here, and the people that are already essentially in the budget, we'll be able to hire them off the same list and basically stagger things in such a way that we're bringing people on that hopefully by August or September, we're going to go from 5 of us to 150. And then we'll see what the impact is, but it's going to be pretty significant. And hopefully you all will count that as one of your major accomplishments, because it's definitely been a challenge. And unfortunately, when you talk to members of the public or even of the fire and EMS service, they don't understand the complexities of everything. But, just the between the budgeting, the HR, the vetting of the people to make sure we're getting absolutely the right people, the Chapter 37, the SOPs, everything, it's a ongoing issue. And at the same time, we're running the fire department and all the operational things that are out there. So it's keeps me young. So,
Got a lot more work to do then.
yes, we do. We do.
So that's all I had on my list of the things to bring up about the budget.
Okay. Any comments or questions regarding the budget?
Well,
Check.
I'd like to state, I hope that when next board comes on, that you have one commissioner who's very interested in the budget process with you, because the magnitude of it, I think it'd be beneficial for the board as a whole to have one person going over the process with you to have a better understanding, because it is very complex. I also want to give special thanks to Commissioner Wance. I think this guy owes a lot to Commissioner Wance and his leadership on this issue. I look back to 4 years ago when I was a commissioner-elect. Commissioner Wance came to my house and he sat me down, had a conversation with me about it. So it's very good to see this come to reality. This is something he has worked very hard for as a county commissioner. And I think the county owes him a lot of respect for what he's done to get us to this point. So thank you, Commissioner Wance.
And thanks needed. It's everybody else that
Well, it took a vision, and you had a vision. I think the county owes you a lot of appreciation for
it was a
that.
vision that started many years ago, right, Rick? But it was just not me. It was a group of us from the Carroll County Volunteer Firemen's Association that saw this vision.
It's very humble of you. Thank you.
With all due respect to the newbies that probably don't remember what that acronym means.
Few in the room that did.
Okay, anything else on the budget? And I think, we'll just leave any comments alone. Anything else on the budget?
No.
Okay.
Listen, I'd love to sit here and promise you the moon, but we ain't gonna be here.
Ted's here, though, so he can promise it all to us. It's,
So,
I get that, and
it's kind of a wonky
that's why I
time
keep
to be
looking at Commissioner
talking
Rothstein.
about budget.
And I'll tell you right now, it will not be a single commissioner focus on fire or a single commissioner focus on any entity. It will be the Board of County Commissioners with you, Mike, and the team and the ESAC in partnership to figure out what is right and what is wrong. That's the value of the ESAC. And I can't say, you've heard me say it enough times about that we lean on the community and the outreach, and that's what the ESAC provides, just like every other commission and board and organization that we have the privilege to work with from the Board of County Commissioners to understand the priorities. It's not any individual. And we are blessed to have a community like this where the ESAC's stepping up and saying, here are the 1 through N list or the priorities that we need to focus our attention on. But it will not be a commissioner focus. It will be the Board of County Commissioners. And you get a whole lot more with 5 than you do with 1. So,
If I may clarify, I think you've missed the point. The whole commission or board is involved, but just like all the other boards and commissions, it's not 5 of us sitting on those boards and commissions. It's 1 single commissioner going on those boards and commissions.
okay, I didn't miss any point, but that's okay. Chapter 37, is there any further discussion on this? Or, I know we had some on Thursday, which I really appreciated, and we have some due outs dealing with overtime discussion and dealing with benefits. The community, comments came in. We're, furthering, our clarification on both. And again, your input, I'm looking at you, but holistically, from the ESAC, really provides the information I think that's necessary to get us over the hurdles, if there are hurdles.
Yeah, I agree. I personally appreciated the conversation. I really appreciated the comment that was made by Commissioner Frazier and the rest of the commissioners that this sitting board would get Chapter 37 done. And we have to. We can't, if there's some things in there that are still a little wonky, I would be happy with the 95%.
Wonky? Is that the technical?
We've heard that before.
Is that the technical fire term or something?
You got to be on the edge. Clearly, you're not quite there yet.
I think we need to push people off the edge.
So if there's some things in there that are still need to be finalized, that's great. We can continue working on those, but let's get the thing signed and we can work on it
Yeah.
as we go through, because we got to get the people hired.
Addendums and modifications, getting that 80-90% solution
Yep.
means a whole lot
Yep.
moving forward.
So that's all I had on Chapter 37. Mike?
So, I mean, with that, I think there's also an opportunity that we have in the time to have a conversation. I think, we brought up the conversation of the overtime impact, that's financial in the county. It's obviously, there's a piece on recruitment and retention, and there's also implications on morale, culture, and staffing, once we kind of get into the operational phases and having employees in place. So, bear with me real quick.
I watched the hearing, by the way.
Got it.
And went over all that. I'm not sure what are we doing now? We're not beating a dead horse here, are we?
No way.
Okay,
No,
'cause
quickly,
I
just
think
giving you a
the
little bit
point-
of information with it.
I think the point was made quite clear by several folks in the room. Some of them, I must say, borderline rude. But I think we clearly heard the point.
Sure. I think, a little bit of what we saw was that there's a lot of, he was unclear where we're going with that. And I think with the implications.
What was unclear?
The implications of where we are financially and otherwise with it. So there was a conversation that was had, and I spoke briefly with Taylor about it. There was a conversation that was had on overtime between a few people. So, as we've talked about it at nauseum at this point, what 207K means in regards to overtime. We would have to work 44 additional hours before we receive time and a half compensation. If you look at the second page, you have what the implications were that the county was assuming was going to be. That's the red on the top right of table 2A there. That's significant on the county. I understand the county's reservations of having any kind of half-time compensation if it's going to mean $4.25 million to the county in liability. I think what we're looking at, and where, when you start looking at practices of us having floaters built into the system, when you look at the actual maximum amount of leave that's available to everybody, you're going to start seeing that in these tables here. The actual amount of leave available to everybody was actually 30 to 40% of what the original calculation was up at the top. For conversation's sake, we don't have any actuals right now. So we had to find a place to have a conversation about what the potential cost of this program was going to be, or at least the fair and what I see fair and ethical compensation for overtime. You know, you look at the average PTO days that would be after you take every minute that somebody in the department could possibly take to off their PTO. That gives us, you know, between 1.7 people off a day to 7.4 people off a day in the out years. I will admit that, you know, there's some variables in there that we can't take into account. We have FLSA leave between maternity, paternity leave, things like that. You also have military leave or even workers' comp issues where you have people off for injury or whatever else. So obviously, those are going to be additional costs and, you know, vacancies, things like that. But you know, I think it's important to say that out of that available time off that we're looking at there on those hours, nobody's going to, well, typically people don't take every single minute of PTO that they're given in a year between sick, annual, and personal leave. So, you know, I think all of that kind of evens out in the end when we start looking at these worst case scenarios here. So really what we're looking at is instead of $4.5 million, if you're looking on page 3, this is where we are compared to what was already budgeted. You're looking at a maximum in FY27 of the worst case scenario that we found after taking those variables into account between floaters and otherwise to $394,000. You know, looking back, I remember mussels in a quarry being dealt with for that amount, and that's not staffing emergencies apparatus.
But if you're talking about what you said already, 30 to 40% is what it would cost you. With 30 to 40% of the 4.5 million is 1.2 to 1.6.
Well, sure. So the hours.
Not the 394.
So that was the hour.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was looking at that, and I get into all the background tables, but double and triple checking that when we start looking at the hours comparably with that. The other piece of that, excuse me, and this is where it comes in, I just figured this out, is that when you look at the 30 to 40%, that was just the hours calculation. That was before you take out the floaters. So because we have floaters built into the system, on this page where we have, I believe it's the third page where you have float personnel, you have 4 in the first 2 years and then 6 there on out. That means that your first 4 or 6 occurrences of over what would potentially be overtime are absorbed by that personnel. So it actually leaves you with only one 24-hour shift that would have to be covered on average, which then takes it down from that 30 to 40% down to a much lower position there. So, I showed it to Taylor. She kind of looked at it and said, I have to look at it, but, it obviously looks like it's something there. The last page and, seeing the head shaking coming from across the table, I'm not sure whether it's going to be received or not, but, the practices of really where we're coming at is the fact of where this compares to the other counties that we're going to be competing against. And I think Commissioner Frazier put that point out the other day pretty clearly. This is a recruitment retention issue. This is an issue of, even Frederick County. I had a lot of guys from Frederick County giving me a call to say, hey, this is something that we just overcame, and it was a great risk, and a lot of it played out to a point where it was completely untenable during COVID for that department to continue that process. And they had to change their practices to come to now paying overtime for anything additional to their scheduled, shifts. So, once again, if we're looking at $4.5 million as a potential, liability on the county for us to absorb, I understand that. $300,000, which is $700,000 less than we already budgeted for overtime. I mean, that, when you're looking at what's fair, what's going to keep people employed here, what's going to attract people. I mean, I've also had phone calls from several people that said after the open hearing that, honestly, and I mean, this might sound like I'm being hyperbolic, but I'm not. I was going to apply, but I'm not coming here to redo that stuff with the overtime. So, I mean, that's what we're facing down when it starts looking at this kind of stuff. The really, what it looks like here is after you start looking at the, the financial implications for the individual, $160 for a part-time shift additional. When you're giving up time with your family for a holiday or whatever else, at least you're getting that back, to be able to, have that, to be able to pay an extra bill or something like that with that, or even have a little bit of savings. So, obviously all these issues come, and I think also, at the end of the assessment, the sheriff's office, which would be our closest comparison, also works 168 hours in a 28-day period and gets overtime for the minute after they work extra. So we're just looking at some kind of equity and consistency on that as well.
I don't have anything else on chapter 37, this is commissioners do.
Now, Mike, I appreciate the work you put into this and the homework and packaging packaging this together. Spoke a little bit too fast for me, but I'm going to
Trying to put a lot of.
capture it as best I can. Also, a few big words that I'm going to have to go to the dictionary, I think, but that's okay. But I think, again, now it's time to just digest this. And,
Absolutely.
you know, getting that from, you know, Mike, I appreciate, you know, you, along with Ted and the team, digesting this, you know, to seeing what, you know, the next steps are going to be. So, but I appreciate the data you're putting in front of us. You know, and I just have to really, it's too much right now, but that's okay. And, okay, so, but I do appreciate the work being done. And honestly, the gist from the last slide is showing how to become not just equitable, but competitive within the region as we're stepping up and standing this, you know, department. It's going to be significant, and it's going to be a significant challenge. So how do we stay competitive? And that's where I think you want to go at the end of this. So, any comments on this? Okay. Impacts of hiring delays.
So I wanted to just give some situational awareness on what's going on around us
Yeah.
as far as hiring right now.
Yeah,
Frederick County is getting ready to begin another hiring process on the 31st of October to the 20th of November. That's to start a class in April. Howard County just closed theirs on 16 September. Montgomery County just closed theirs on 31st of August. So a lot of those folks have already got people in a pipeline or applicants in a pipeline as they're going through. And that's just the ones that I looked up last night as I was doing my thoughts. I know Baltimore County has things going on. Bruce, what's their status?
I don't know particularly what.
They hire continuously at this point,
much,
They-
yeah.
which is about at least 100 people a year.
So there's lots of other stuff going on in other jurisdictions too. I know Anne Arundel's getting ready to do something as well too. But I want to give you an example, what we may be looking at in the future in regards to hiring. I have some numbers that I want to share from Frederick County and their recruit training class that will start this coming January. So when they started, they had 658 applicants. Of those 658 applicants, only 340 took the actual written test. So that could be for any number of reasons. These folks got hired someplace else, they got conditional offers somewhere else, they found other employment, or they just said, I'm not interested anymore. Of those 340 that took the test, 270 participated in their physical ability test. What they want to do is want to extend 120 conditional offers out to people to hire 50 people.
so out of that 270, they are, what'd you say?
They want to issue 120 conditional offers.
Yeah,
And then from those 120 conditional offers, they want to hire 50 people. That would be 2 classes of 25 each that they want to start at the same time. Now, the hiring process that they're entering into right now for 31st of October till 20 November, that is for an April class for another class of 25 people. So within the next year, they want to hire 75 people to their department. And of those 75 people, 32 are being funded through a SAFER grant. Which means that they'll have to pick, the county will have to pick up after, in year 4, paying for those employees. So, again, I just want to provide some situational awareness of what's going on currently. Now, when we say that these folks are being hired, they're being hired to go through a several-month training program to become EMTs, firefighters, ride the ladder trucks, all those type of things, which will be months. We're looking at hiring lateral people, people who are already trained. So our pool of people is smaller than what we're looking at than looking at the general public who's applying to be a firefighter.
The priority that we have is hiring EMS.
Firefighters, EMTs, and firefighter paramedics, and paramedics, correct, sir.
Firefighters or, what, I mean, is it firefighters?
Slash
Slash.
EMT.
EMT.
So both.
So it's not one or the other?
They gotta
It's
be both.
Cross-trained dual role,
Yep.
at all times? Everybody we want to hire?
Except for paramedics. You might
except for
just-
paramedics. We're gonna hire paramedics only.
So the others are dual role, fire and EMS?
Yes.
Yep.
Most of the stations are currently hiring those.
Fire EMS.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Because they can participate in dual roles. We can use them as EVODs, we can use them as EMT drivers, we can manipulate.
But the
them.
critical role we have, or critical need we have, is EMS.
Yes.
Okay.
Do any of them
I just
need,
want to make sure I understand the environment.
When you say delays of hiring, impact of hiring delays, what do you mean? You mean?
So what I mean, the longer that we wait to begin our hiring process, the longer other
Right,
counties
okay,
around us
but
have already started.
but we're not delaying anything.
No,
We're trying to move
no,
this,
no, I'm
okay, because
just-
the way that sounds like we're trying to push this off.
No, no, no,
We're
no, no.
not. We're trying to move
That's-
this along as quickly as possible, is the way I see it.
And I said that with chapter 37, I applaud the group for sitting
Right,
there
okay.
trying to get that on. I'm not throwing stones at anything about anybody trying to slow anything down. I'm just trying to make the point that the longer we wait.
Right, that point's well taken. I just, maybe it should have been phrased differently.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying. Because it just makes it sound like we're holding
No,
this
no,
back.
no, no, no.
We have, since I've been here, we haven't tried to hold us back at all. We're trying to move forward as quickly as we can. Just takes a lot of time to get everything in the right order and move everything forward. Because when we start onboarding people, we want to have our ducks in a row, basically, so we don't have to, oh, wait, we didn't think
Right.
about that. We think we want it all thought about.
Again, I am not
Right,
throwing
okay.
stones.
It is the
You're-
process.
You're just
that's
talking about today's environment, and that's.
Yeah, and I understand exactly what you're
Okay,
saying that
yeah,
way,
okay,
Yeah, yeah, I'm
That
not
makes
throwing
sense.
stones at
Right.
anything.
yep,
Yeah.
makes sense.
You know, we've come a long way in
Yeah.
the last couple of years, and just to be sitting here trying to finalize this at this time says a lot. And we could be, you know, a year or two away. We're not. We're moving ahead fast. I think for government, we're moving extremely fast.
And commissioners,
Which I hate
in
to
my
say.
background, I firmly get that from trying to do similar things, what we're trying to do here. I totally get that.
And thank you for hanging in with us. I mean, we're getting there. We have the same goal you have.
Yeah, and that's, again, I'm just providing, I wanted to, as I said, provide situation awareness. That's what's on my
Okay.
talking
Yeah,
points here.
no,
Gotcha.
that makes
Okay.
sense.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to say is, most of the Carroll County Fire Departments, if you go to their websites, everybody's accepting applications. Everybody's still trying to fill their staffs and staffing for their units that they currently are staffing today. But we're all bidding against each other. So hopefully by starting this process, when we do start this process, we'll stop all that, you know, of us trying to bid against each other for people.
Are they gonna have to be rehired, or go through, if they're hired today
Yes, they will have to go through rehiring.
in a fire
They'll have to go
station,
through
they
the
will have
county's
to go
process.
through.
Mhm.
So the incentive of being hired today is really just to get on the ground, make money and do what you love doing.
You're taking a temporary job right now because
You're taking a
we're
temporary
now
job.
within, for every company in Carroll County, we're
Right.
within 2 years of them no longer hiring anybody. So people that sign on today are taking essentially a temporary job. They're getting their foot in the door, and then the question will be is whether or not we believe they are at the level of being a lateral hire for pay scale.
How many applications come into the 13 stations? Any
Oh.
idea?
Triple,
No.
triple.
It's not a fight for the job. It's
Yeah.
pretty much who applies gets hired. I mean, there's really not, especially when you get to the paramedic level. If you're trying to hire a paramedic if you have more than one applicant, it's probably a surprise.
We have 3 currently from the volunteer companies, 3 paramedics we're processing. They have to go through the medical director and Mike Stoner in order to get validated to be paramedics in Carroll County. So there's 3 right now, and that's,
And the large part of the challenge of this also is isn't it the schooling, we talked about this, the wait time from hire to actually being
Well, that's a
on the
little
ground doing the
different.
job?
That's more the volunteers.
That's more volunteers.
right,
Yeah.
right. These are people that are
Okay.
pre-qualified.
They've already done all
Okay, I
that. They've done the
apologize.
wait time on their own. They're
Okay,
trained and
okay.
ready to go.
I appreciate, okay.
The only other part of that it remains to be seen, most of our jurisdictions around us have tried lateral hires. And for the most part, they have less than 50% success rate in retaining those people past 3-4 years, for whatever reason. So that's another thing that we need to keep on our agenda, because this isn't going to be like, we're going to be done hiring in 2 years.
Right.
No.
Right.
No, even though you think, oh, we're a young department, we have a long time to go, most likely, we will be continuing to hire
Yeah.
and to fill those numbers indefinitely
Yeah.
as people
And,
move on.
and we'll also
That
have
makes
to start
sense.
looking at, what I'm talking about a couple years down the road here, is when we talk about the minimum numbers of people that we're hiring right now. In order to do some of the things where we grow our own, where we start our own academy classes and things like that, there's gonna have to be, staff built up to do those kind
Yeah.
of things too. Because if we can take them from the field to teach an academy class, now we're taking them from the field and we're paying overtime and we're trying to fill that void too. So all of these things are trickling down. And the other point that I made about the volunteer department still advertising for people, we get this done this year, we're only talking about 3 stations, those other stations could have to continue to hire. So now they're all competing against a county government fire department. So it's going to be a rough ride, but it's not anything that I don't think can be overcome. One thing that I would like to suggest, and I'm glad Ted and Taylor are in the room, and with Commissioner Rothstein sitting here for going on the next board, since we are going to begin hiring this fiscal year, we still have a lot of money that hasn't been spent for payroll. And if our list is long enough that we can start year 2 hiring in year 1, that would help get us that much closer ahead of the game when we start year 2. Now, did I make any sense with that comment that I just made? I'm just saying, there should be money in the pot to help pay for hiring years 2's people in year 1, because we haven't spent a whole year's worth of payroll in year 1.
Do we believe we can recruit that many?
Don't know, that's what I'm saying, that's a big if, as we have to look
I
and see
mean,
what our list
that-
looks
We
like.
don't know.
Yeah.
And our other issue is also going to be one of retention. We may have a lot of people come and apply for our jobs, and within 6 months, we might have a 20% turnover rate.
Right.
Which is why we're not buying them all deluxe uniforms right away, because we're going to bring people in, and then they're going to get that phone call from Montgomery or Baltimore County, and again, it gets back to making sure we have the right retention elements in
Right.
place. And it's going to happen regardless. By the same token, there might be people that are unhappy in those other counties that say, hey, I live in Carroll County, I grew up there, I want to work in Carroll County. So I can't sit here and predict things that haven't happened yet. That's the biggest challenge.
I thought that's your job.
Well, but part of it, I'll add that to the, right.
So I understand the argument by using, the additional funds, but I think it is important to understand whether we will have the ability to even recruit that many. I mean, it's
Agreed
like
to.
putting a cart before the horse type of thing, so I don't know.
Yeah, and our,
I'm living in nirvana right now when I make that comment. We're gonna have, a lot of people that are gonna wanna apply for the jobs. I just wanted to
Yeah,
plant the seed that, hey, this is something that I would like to discuss if our list is long enough that we can get into some of the.
indirectly, we're going to be doing that because the people off of our hiring list are going to extend on that list into July the 1st of 2023. So they, in fact, will be hired off that same list. The challenge will be is getting those first 88 on board. We're going to start the lieutenant hiring process in November, and at the earliest, we aren't going to have the first lieutenant on board till probably January. And then once the 12 lieutenants are on board, then we start the hiring process. 3 weeks to advertise, the written test, the physical ability, all those steps in the process. It's going to be a challenge to have the remaining people on board by June the 30th.
Correct.
To be quite honest about it.
Correct.
I think when we look at kind of the recruitment process, I think this first year is gonna be the easiest of all of them, because we already have, you know, we could probably look at probably 75 to 80 applications coming from the people we already have working in the county.
Right.
You know, looking at these things, I mean, Rick was talking about, you know, Frederick County, their hiring process, I mean, this is consistent through all the jurisdictions. They're just getting, I mean, historically, the police were the ones that had the hard time bringing anybody, recruiting anybody. Overnight, it all of a sudden became our issue too. We stopped being able to get applicants. And I know, you know, the job force out there has been slim anyways, but, you know, I'm not sure what we're looking at feasibly in year 2, but, you know, the importance of leveraging the people that we have here, and then, you know, that recruitment process is gonna be key for that success.
Sheriff DeWeese hit it on the head, you know, in his article that was in the paper this past Sunday, about people not wanting to be, you know, not applying for the jobs in the police department like they used to. The same thing's being said in the fire department.
Right.
Steve, when you got started, there was thousands of people that were applying for 15 jobs. It's not that way anymore. Some counties are extending their application process just to get their numbers up.
I will say, I commented in that article, and it cut my comment, because I did say supporting the men and women in red and blue, and they just said blue. I was like, really? But, yeah, because of these issues.
And our greatest need is going to be for paramedics. And
Yeah.
paramedics are really the premium employees. Frederick County, I think, got 7 paramedics out of those numbers. They were down. I read the other day, the city of Salisbury, not the biggest economic engine in the world, they're offering a $10,000 bonus for paramedics. Maybe we should offer 20,000. But it's
Somebody fell out of their chair over there.
he's not. He didn't even smile. But that, you know, it's just going to be the challenge, which is why we're going to single role paramedics as well. If somebody wants to be a paramedic and do that for 25 years and they love
Right.
being a paramedic, we want them employed.
Right.
And when they go on a fire, they can take blood pressures. It's, you know,
It's universal. I mean,
everybody's, and you get around the state.
yeah, I was with a bunch of state leaders last week, and the topic just came up, and it's just not here. And, you know, go a step further and look at the hospitals and their RN hirings. They're having a heck of a time. Down at BB Health in Delaware, they're providing $90,000 sign-on bonuses for certain nurses that will come on board. So it's not just that. And to counter your comment, Mike, I know you get around, but I get around too.
Oh, absolutely.
And I've talked to quite a few people that are just waiting in the queue.
Oh, yeah.
Regardless of what is listed here or what we do, that really like what's happening and really want to get in on the ground floor. So I want to make sure that your comment doesn't, you know, end up as being the, you know, well, there's people not coming because of the overtime. That's sincerely not the truth. There are people that are waiting in the queue that want to get in here on the ground floor. And regardless of what our decision is on the specifics in 37, that is what it is. But I'll tell you, I've talked to many. I talked to 2 kids in Caroline County last week that would love to relocate here because they don't like what's happening there. So just hang on. I'm going to say I'm cautiously optimistic at this point, and I'm not throwing the negative comments out like that.
Well, just to clarify too, on our side, you know, I think it's important to look at the kind of what that will do to us, because you know, when you look at Anne Arundel County,
I'm not here to debate that. We're going to do
no,
that.
certainly, but
I wanted to make that point clear that,
and I appreciate
that
that.
there are folks that they got the door cracked and they're ready to open it up once Chief Robinson hits the.
There it is.
There you
Converted
Just
him,
passed
so
it.
then that's,
Well, I mean, yeah.
And one of the other things, and I know I mentioned it at another meeting, is we're going to focus again with our EST students, and there might be another type of employment that going forward, I got to just met the workforce development person, where we might be able to develop an apprenticeship. You graduate, you're 18, you can drive an ambulance. We hire you on 3 days a week, putting up extra ambulances, and those other days a week to make your 40 hours, we send you to the community college and you take the paramedic program. And at the end of that program, you're already hired with benefits, so the $9,000 tuition assistance pays for that program. It's a win for the college, it's a win for us, and we would have them sign some type of contract that says, we're giving you your education, you've got to work for us as a paramedic for 3 years. And that, we might be onto something with that, where we're now going to recruit our own homegrown people. We're going to train them at the college, which has an excellent program we're going to get more connected to. And now we've got young people wanting a paramedic job. Again, they're going to see what the other paramedics are getting, and while we might lose them, we've now gotten 5 years out of those people. And so they're only 24 years old. They can still go out and do what they do, but we could always have a steady flow of those people, which, you know, might address, we'd have to put a cap on it, but it would be a win for the county in that we would get 3 or 4 extra ambulances during the daytime hours. It would be a win for that person because we're developing them, and then through the apprenticeship program, it becomes an official Department of Labor program. They go out as a journeyman paramedic firefighter. So we're gonna.
Don't forget too, that your 2472 is resonating.
Right, and that's what people want. There's people that are working in Baltimore City, and they're working 12-hour shifts, in Baltimore County 10 or 14, and they're running 20 calls in a shift. They're not getting meals, they're going home beat up, and they go back to their stations. They don't have a support group like you'd think they would.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
some of those people are getting tired of that.
There's few things out there
So, yeah, no.
that are really.
And there's a lot
really
of,
looking good to a lot of folks.
and a lot of viable retired leadership that we can tap into. So I'm optimistic on
I am
the
too.
recruitment.
The last bit of my statement I was gonna say is just how I think at the same time with even those challenges, we do see a lot of people that are coming here. And there's, hopefully, I think that what really builds up this hiring process is the fact that exactly what you just said, Steve, is that ground floor mentality, is that you see a lot of people, but, there's a lot of your compatriots from Baltimore County that are giving me a call too, saying, hey, listen, I might be able to come over there and do another career and get that in. And I do think those things are positive. I think the things that you brought up are things that are building this department up. I think it's honing in some of those issues is important, and I think the conversation's valid and important to have. But also at the same time, this is hugely positive what we've accomplished here, and Director Robinson, I have to give a lot of kudos to the leadership he's given us through this and built that up.
Okay, yeah, please.
Your education paid for process has a lot of merit to it. There's a lot of large companies out here to do this with young students. Come work for us here X amount of time.
Yeah.
The other time you're in class or whatever, get their education paid for, especially with the rising cost of college education. A lot of people may fall into that. Maybe a win for everybody.
While we're talking about the education, the college offers a CDL program. Is that something you all would be able to utilize? Do you need a CDL to drive a fire truck? Is that something?
Well, that's a
Yes
conversation
and
at
no.
several meetings.
All right.
The easy answer is yes and no. The chief has the ability to say that they can have an in-house program to allow them to drive, and some of our departments are using that as not having to get CDLs. But then you have to have a robust system to be able to train and essentially.
Isn't there a
evaluate
liability attached to that?
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, and that goes back to Chief Cecilia, as in Devilbiss. And we've worked with her in risk management, and Maryland's a little bit different than most states. We have what's called a non-commercial CDL, which you do everything for the CDL, but you're not required for the DOT physical, which technically is covered under our physical occupational relationship that we have, so.
I was wondering if there can be a cost analysis done that if we did do all the CDL proper training, would we recover that potentially in a better liability policy? Is that a potential? Something to look into?
It may not be a nominal.
Okay.
It
Yeah,
would be.
I don't think it's fiscal, I think it's more risk association. And, in the military, when it comes to equipment, we would take equipment out by putting an X on it, and the commander had the authority to do a circle X to allow that equipment to go forward. You don't want to do that, you know? You want to step over and get the equipment ready. You want people to be trained appropriately and not have to circle X a driver.
And so if you're being hired for a driver position here, you're going to have to produce that license with
Yeah.
your application.
Okay.
And we're going to validate every one of them through the MVA checks, so.
So I was wondering if younger people coming in,
Yeah.
if that's something you'd offer, that we'd put you in a CD program as well, whether it's worthwhile or not.
We better prepare them for this, as
Yeah.
they could better prepare them as being competitive to get
Yes.
hired.
Okay,
And the new DOT regulations require completion of one of those schools anymore.
okay.
So that Carroll program is going to just increase. in-
Yeah, before we could do in-house training and get people, trained up on the walk around, on the skills, and then take them up in the fire equipment to get tested. Now you can't do that without having that additional, almost like what they required with the initial 16-year-olds needing driver's ed, some kind of driver's ed program. Now you need it for CDL.
Yeah, so our safest thing right now, liability otherwise, is show up with your license.
Okay.
And we save all those headaches.
What else? This is not, definitely not to cut short, but
No, the only-
we are in open discussion, so yeah,
Yeah, we're
please.
in open discussion. The only, I have a couple things that I wanted to
Sure.
say, and one is ESAC is still down one citizen rep, and I encourage all of our ESAC members to go out and talk to citizens that in case they'd be interested in serving on this board.
I apologize, is it a citizen rep from a specific area, or is
No,
it just a
anywhere in the
citizen?
county. Anywhere in the county. They just can't have any fire department affiliation.
Yeah, which is
Okay.
a tad bit challenging to me after seeing the progress that we've made. It's really difficult to bring someone on board as a citizen rep that virtually has zero experience or zero knowledge of fire department. It almost takes them 3 months to learn the acronyms, because we don't stop
Longer.
with a group in the room when we're off on a tear.
Yeah.
So, I had one of the citizen reps came up to me that's not serving any longer and said, I couldn't get up to speed and I felt uncomfortable. So I'm gonna suggest before I get out of here in 54 days.
Not that
Who's
you're,
counting?
not that you're
Who's
counting.
that perhaps we relax that particular part of the citizen rep. Now, it's not gonna be up just to me, but I'm gonna suggest it. And I don't think it should be a uniform person, but I think someone who's got some basic knowledge of fire service would be a good fit on ESAC.
So I'd love to talk to you about that offline.
Or retired, or what.
Or retired, or whatever, yeah. And again, not the vice president of Harney or something, but somebody who's been around, that just because they've got a son or somebody in the service, or whatever, that's direct affiliation, really, that's the way it reads. So I'd like to try to relax that in the best method that we can.
Well,
So
you-
if we can talk offline, we can do that. But I
You got
think
a lot
that would
of,
help.
Carroll County is an area where you've got retired people from everywhere living here.
Well, the other thing is,
In 55 days, recruit him.
Would he be eligible?
You're very hard pressed to find somebody that's not associated with a volunteer fire company here.
Right.
But I'll give you one.
If for no other reason, they go make pancakes every third Sunday of the month, so it's just. I
Well,
think we
and
need
it
to look-
says,
Jimmy
to
Judge.
pull from our bylaws, it says not have active affiliation with any fire department. So if they were
So maybe we-
past or not a member of one of our stations, they came from Anne Arundel or they came from somewhere else where they have the background in it, but not necessarily from Carroll County, it could be interpreted like that the way it's written.
Okay. All right.
Okay? We know there's gonna be challenges, and we don't know what some of those challenges are until we start going down this path. And I totally get that. I'm gonna speak on behalf of ESAC that we look forward to continuing to provide advice and guidance as we continue to make progress on this much-needed journey, as we continue to establish this county combination fire department. So that's all the comments that I had today. Commissioners, have any other questions of me or?
Anything down the line? Mike?
No, I just say, is we have included Chapter 37 with ESAC for a reason, and I certainly recognize, because I can't do everything by myself, and I can't take credit for anything, because everyone has been involved since my day one, volunteer, career, all the organizations, and what I want to do when we start getting career people on board is be an unofficial group, but I want to get the leaders of, probably on a monthly basis, of CC Visa, the IAFF, and the ESAC chair to come sit down with me an hour each month, beyond all these other groups, not that they're not critical, but just to informally advise me on different things. And I look to this group, you know, when we're vetting things and getting things approved, because, you know, if you give somebody too much power, power will corrupt. Not a title change necessarily, but it's
I do enjoy when you say no, but, and then go, it's okay. Bruce,
No, thank you. No other comments?
ladies?
I would like to specifically thank you, Commissioner Rothstein, for coming to our commissioners' meeting Friday night. What we're trying to encourage is the incoming commissioners to have some sort of experience with what's going on and bring them into the fold, as it were. And Commissioner Rothstein did an excellent job of helping us to navigate a lot of the questions that they had and that we had, and I specifically want to thank you for that. Not that I'm disregarding you guys, but he is coming back, so we decided that he was
There's no
gonna-
place I'd rather have been.
Well, we
I
do
know,
appreciate
she
it.
did.
We got a lot of very good questions asked and answered that night.
Thank
And
you.
I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And the volunteers are
Yep.
here to support this entire endeavor. and
Absolutely.
We'd like to continue to do that.
And by the way, it was dirty bath water, so
Yeah,
just saying.
we're out, so whatever. Thanks.
It's all right. I really appreciate what you're doing after being in this business for 48 years. I'm one of the first females that came into the county. I'm glad to see this coming to fruition, and I'm glad to see you doing it at an equitable time and making sure it's done correctly, not haphazardly where we have to go back and redo and redo and redo. So thank you.
Absolutely. Nolan?
I just want to thank all of you for all the work you've done. You know, I'm at the end of my term, but I'll try to work with you as best I can in my future capacity. I know that there's hundreds and hundreds of people behind all of yous that brought this up to this point, and all those people behind the scenes out there watching, you deserve a lot of credit and respect for what you did. And this is a manifestation of your love, the love of your community and your county. And I think that's why all of us here serve, because we truly love Carroll County. And this is about modernizing and bringing Carroll County up to a level of quality of life that we haven't had in this realm of EMS. So I want to thank everyone out there. And once again, I want to reiterate my thanks to Commissioner Wance. He gave a lot of credit to everyone out there, but he is on this board and he's represented your industry and he's done it very well. So thank you to everyone.
Yeah. Our level of service is changing because of how our, let me just say this. I will firmly believe, and I will stick to my guns till the day ends, that the level of service that has been provided to the county has been top-notch. We're not doing this because the level of service is going down. We're trying to keep it at a level where it's supposed to be.
Well said.
I'm just glad we're here. At this point, you know, 6 years ago, I wasn't sure we were ever going to get to here, and here we are, right on the verge of making history. So, thank you.
Thank you all for all the time you put into this, because I know it took a lot of time, a lot of hours, a lot of late meetings. I do understand that. I'm very happy that this will be done before I'm out of office. I really am. Because to be honest with you, like Commissioner Weaver just said, I didn't think it was going to happen while I was still in office, but I'm very happy that it is.
You don't need to hear anything. It's been a long ride.
Second.
I'm glad we are where we are, you know. And when we're out of here, I hope that the other board continues to put the importance on this that needs to be. You know, 6, 7 years ago, I was beating on the heads of a couple of the commissioners, not these two, that didn't understand it at all. But, you know, we're here now, and I'm glad we are. And we've had some setbacks, but all in all, I think we're in a good spot. I really do. I think, and I hate hearing negative comments that gets us on an off-ramp somewhere. That's why I'm so passionate about coming back and focus at this point, because I do want to see this. And these things that get thrown at us, these curveballs, just throw us the fastball, baby. We can hit that, because that's down the middle. And we're going to get it. We will. But don't throw these things out. I was a little bit disheartened at the public hearing with some of the comments. So, you know, for and kind of strong, smart individuals here will get it. And thank you, guys. I've been at some of those ESAC meetings that, you know, my wife texts me and says, "You still at the public safety council?" Yeah, I'm still here. So, anyway. That's,
Left field fence, Aaron Judge, number 62, just saying.
yeah, right.
Life is good. I need a
Probably
motion to.
fastball down the middle, too.
It sure was. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.
I need a second.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.